She had been on 14 dates in 8 months. She told me this matter-of-factly, the way you report a number that has stopped surprising you. 14 dates. 3 of them got a second. 1 of those got a third. None of them went further. She is 53 years old. Her name is Sandra. And what she told me next is the thing I keep thinking about. She said, "Patricia, I am doing everything right. I am showing up. I am being open. I am giving people a fair chance." And every time I come home, I feel like I just spent 3 hours performing a version of myself that I don't fully recognize. That sentence is what this conversation is about. I am Patricia Hayes. Sit with me for a while. 40 million people over 50 are dating right now. And most of them, Sandra included, for a long time are carrying a belief that goes unexamined. The belief that if they just do it long enough and try hard enough and present themselves attractively enough, the right thing will eventually land. What no one tells you is this: how you date matters as much as whether you date. The version of yourself you bring to the table determines almost everything about what finds you at it. Sandra had spent the first 6 months doing what most women do when they step back into dating after a long marriage. She was warm. She was accommodating. She laughed at things that were not quite funny enough to laugh at. She let conversations run long when she wanted to leave and cut herself short when she actually had something to say. She was, in the most precise sense of the word, pleasant. And she was miserable, not obviously, not in a way she would have named on a first date or admitted to a friend over lunch. But there was a specific feeling she kept coming home with, a particular kind of tiredness that had nothing to do with the hour. It was the tiredness of a woman who has been holding herself in a particular shape for 3 hours. The tiredness of performance. The shift came on a Wednesday evening at a restaurant she had been to before with her ex-husband, which she realized halfway through the date was a mistake. She was sitting across from a man who was perfectly decent, attentive, employed, had opinions about things, and she found herself watching the clock. Not impatiently, sadly. She was sad that she was watching the clock. She was sad that she had come here hoping for something and was now just waiting for the evening to conclude politely. She went home and sat in her kitchen and asked herself a question she had not thought to ask before. She said, "What do I actually want?" Not, "What do I want in a man? What do I want from this?" From the experience of dating itself. What would it need to feel like for me to want to do it again? She could not answer the question. She had not thought about it in those terms. Here is what I want to put to you, because I think it is at the heart of why dating after 50 feels so much harder than it needs to. Most women who come to dating in their 50s and beyond come to it in a posture of evaluation. They are wondering, is he right for me? Does he tick the boxes? Is this someone I could build something with? These are not wrong questions, but they are incomplete ones because they locate all the relevant information outside of you. The more important question, and the one that most women do not think to ask, is an internal one. How do I feel when I am with this person? Not in terms of attraction, though that matters. In terms of self, do I feel more like myself or less like myself? Do I feel expanded or contracted? Do I leave a conversation with this person feeling like I've been heard or like I've been performing? Those questions cannot be answered from a list of requirements. They can only be answered by paying attention to your own experience while it is happening, which requires that you are present to your own experience while it is happening. which is harder than it sounds. For women who have spent decades prioritizing other people's experiences over their own, Sandra realized when she sat in her kitchen on that Wednesday evening that she had been attending to everyone else's experience of the date except hers. Was he comfortable? Was he enjoying himself? Was she making him feel interesting? She had been tracking all of that carefully and automatically, and had entirely forgotten to notice what she herself was feeling. This is not unusual. It is, for many women of her generation, the default setting, the habit of attention that was trained into them so early and so thoroughly that it no longer registers as a choice. It just feels like good manners. It is not, in the context of dating, good manners. It is self-erasure. And it produces the particular exhaustion Sandra described, the tiredness of a woman who has been everywhere except inside her own experience for 3 hours. Before I tell you what Sandra did differently, I want to sit with something that I think gets overlooked in most conversations about dating after 50. And that is the question of what you bring with you. Not in terms of baggage, that word is used too loosely, and it tends to make people defensive in a way that is not useful. What I mean is more specific. I mean the relational habits that you developed over the course of your previous relationships and that you carry into the new ones without necessarily knowing you are doing so. Sandra had spent 19 years in a marriage where she was competent and capable and largely invisible. Not because her husband was a difficult man, he was not particularly, but because the relationship had arranged itself over time in a way where her role was to manage and his role was to inhabit. She managed the logistics, the emotional temperature, the social calendar, the needs of their children. He inhabited the home she made. This is not unusual. It is, in many marriages of her generation, simply how things settled. The consequence of 19 years of this arrangement was a woman who had become very, very good at anticipating other people's needs and correspondingly less practiced at knowing, naming, and asking for her own. When she started dating, she did not leave this behind. You do not leave the habits of 19 years behind when you walk out the door. She brought the full apparatus of her relational training into every date she went on. The attentiveness, the accommodation, the management of her own needs downward. And she found that it produced exactly what it had always produced. Relationships where she was appreciated and unseen. She changed the way she dated. Not the who she stayed on the apps, kept accepting invitations, but the how changed completely. She started paying attention to herself on dates, the way she had previously been paying attention to the other person. When something landed wrong, she noticed it instead of rationalizing it. When she was bored, she acknowledged the boredom instead of performing engagement. When she had an actual opinion, she said it not aggressively, just honestly, and watched what happened. What happened was instructive. Some men found it refreshing. They leaned in. The conversation became real in a way that the performances never had. There was actual exchange, the kind where both people leave knowing something they did not know before. Some men found it uncomfortable, and she found their discomfort useful, not as a judgment of them. She had spent years being unsettled by directness herself and understood it, but as information. A man who contracts when a woman takes up appropriate space is telling her something important about what the relationship will feel like. It is better to know this at date 1 than at month 6. She told me that when she stopped performing, the dates got shorter. Not unpleasantly, she simply had a clearer sense, earlier, of whether something was worth continuing, and she stopped overextending the ones that were not. 3 hours became 90 minutes. The energy she spent went down. The quality of what she was looking for went up. And then after several months of this, she met someone. His name is not relevant. What is relevant is how she described meeting him. She said, I knew within 20 minutes. Not that he was the one, I don't think in those terms anymore, but that he was real, that the conversation we were having was an actual conversation, not two people auditioning for each other. I felt like myself sitting there. That had not happened before. There is something else I want to address because Sandra brought it up, and I suspect she is not alone in it. She asked me at a certain point in our conversations whether she was being too selective, whether by holding the standard she had set for herself, the standard of feeling like herself, of being present rather than performing, she was narrowing the field in a way that was not realistic. It is a fair question, and I want to answer it honestly. Yes, you will eliminate some people by holding this standard. You will eliminate the people who want a pleasant surface without the substance beneath it. You will eliminate the people who are made uncomfortable when a woman knows her own mind and says so. You will eliminate the arrangements that ask you to be smaller than you are. The question is whether you want those things. And if the answer is no, if you have lived long enough to know that pleasant surfaces without substance produce a particular kind of loneliness, and that arrangements which require you to be smaller are corrosive in ways that accumulate slowly and become visible only when it is too late, then eliminating them is not narrowing the field, it is clarifying it. Sandra and I talked about this for a long time. She came at it from multiple angles because she had been raised, as so many women of her generation were, with the belief that selectivity in women is a character flaw, that a woman who is too particular is a woman who will end up alone, that the sensible strategy is to be broadly accommodating and grateful for what presents itself. She had been broadly accommodating for 19 years. She knew with some precision where it led. I want to say something about the age thing because it comes up. Women over 50 who are dating will encounter regularly and sometimes bruisingly the fact that they are navigating a dating pool that is not entirely neutral about age. There are men who are looking for someone younger. This is true, and it is worth naming plainly so that it does not feel like a personal rejection when it is simply a preference that has nothing to do with you. There are also men who specifically want what a woman in her 50s brings: the self-knowledge, the lack of performance, the clarity about what she will and will not tolerate, the way she engages with the world from a place of genuine confidence rather than managed impression. These men exist. They are not always visible because the culture tends to talk about the former group more than the latter. Sandra said something about this that struck me as exactly right. She said, I spent so long worrying about whether I was enough by the standards of a world that was not designed with me in mind. At some point, I stopped worrying about those standards and started asking whether the person in front of me was enough by mine. That shift from being evaluated to doing the evaluating is one of the real possibilities of dating at this age. It does not happen automatically. It requires the specific kind of confidence that comes from knowing yourself. But it is available. And once it becomes your natural orientation, the whole experience changes. Dating after 50 is not easier than dating at 25. The logistics are more complicated. The history is heavier. The time feels more finite and therefore more precious. And there is a specific kind of grief that comes with it that I do not think gets named enough. The grief of the relationship you thought you were going to have, the one that was supposed to last, the one that was supposed to be enough, and the strange, disorienting task of building something new from its edges. The world tells you this should feel like an opportunity. And eventually, for many women, it does. But first, it feels like loss. And the loss deserves to be acknowledged before it is reframed as anything else. What I want you to know is that both things are true at once. The grief is real, and the possibility is real. The past matters, and the future is genuinely open. You are allowed to be sad about what ended and curious about what is coming. You do not have to perform recovery any more than Sandra had to perform pleasantness on those dates. The honest version of this, the version that includes the sadness and the hope at the same time, is not weakness. It is accuracy. But it has something that dating at 25 does not. It has the possibility of being done by someone who actually knows herself, who is not still constructing her identity around whatever the person across the table reflects back, who has enough experience to know the difference between the feeling of potential and the feeling of performance, who can sit across from someone and say, quietly and without drama, "This is not it," or "This is something worth staying for." Sandra is still seeing her person. She is 53. She is not in a hurry. She told me recently that for the first time in her adult life, she is in a relationship where she does not feel like she is shrinking to fit. She said, "I think I had to fail at being pleasant for long enough to figure out that pleasant was not the thing I was actually after. What she was after," she told me, "was something simpler and harder. To be known, to sit across from someone and have them see the actual person without the performance and choose to stay anyway." She found that not because she lowered her standard, because she finally, and for the first time, held it. My name is Patricia Hayes. This is Patricia's Porch, a place where I believe honest conversation is the most useful thing I can offer you. If today's conversation gave you something, share it with a woman who is somewhere in her own dating after 50 story. She needs to hear it. And hit subscribe below because I make a new episode every week and I would love to keep this conversation going. Thank you for being here with me. I will see you next time.